Senator Sinema, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our nominees for joining us. This is not an easy process, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. Mr. Rivas, when I hear from Arizonans and Arizona business owners, they're concerned with complex and burdensome rules coming out of Washington. Hardworking Arizonans want to comply with sensible rules, but regulatory agencies don't do a good job of looking back and making sure that the rules in place are achieving their goals and limiting impact on businesses. My SMART Act makes sure that agencies commit to reviewing their most extensive regulations when they're initially published by requiring that each major rule include a review plan. This plan will include methodologies for the review and a proposed timeline. If confirmed, will you commit to working with me to pass this legislation? And more generally, will you comment on the institutionalization of retrospective review in our regulatory process?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I would definitely commit to working with you on this important issue. I strongly favor evidence-based decision-making. It's critical that the benefits of regulation justify the costs. Now, under the Executive Order 12866 framework, that analysis is generally prospective, but Executive Order 13563 does contemplate a retrospective review. And I think it is important to learn wherever we can about the impacts of regulation. We do it at the front end in deciding whether regulation should be promulgated, but it should be done not only at the front end, and I agree with the sentiment that you expressed, that retrospective review is important. I also agree that it's good to be able to have a data gathering plan adopted that would make retrospective review possible. And so if confirmed, I really look forward to working, consulting with the OIRA team and working with you and your staff on how to make retrospective review a real part of the regulatory process.
Thank you. Now, while guidance documents do not have the power to bind, they do have the power to significantly influence the behavior of private parties. Understanding this influential nature, what do you believe is the proper treatment of guidance documents by OIRA? And specifically, what flexibility should agencies have in the publication of guidance? And should these documents be subject to centralized review? And then finally, what standards do you believe should apply to such a review?
Thank you, Senator. I think guidance documents are a very important part of the regulatory process, and they should comply with transparency and public participation norms. They should be public. They should be public in a user-friendly way. Significant guidance documents currently undergo OIRA review, and I think that is appropriate. We're operating under an OMB memorandum dating back to 2007. So if confirmed, I would make sure that there is in place a guidance process that is transparent, that the American people have access to the information, that has opportunities for meaningful public participation, and has and undergoes OIRA review where the guidance is labeled to be economically significant. I think those are all important components of a well-functioning guidance process, and I would do whatever I could in this position to make sure that the guidance process is working as well as it can for the American people.
Thank you. You know, I'm a strong believer in the benefits of cost-benefit analysis as articulated in Executive Order 12866 and OMB Circular A4. Unfortunately, it seems that many individuals believe that this analysis is simply a code for deregulation and weakened federal engagement. So first, could you provide a brief overview of your understanding of the correct role of cost-benefit analysis in our rulemaking process? And second, what steps will you take, if confirmed, to highlight the positive outcomes associated with robust analysis and a strong, independent OIRA?
Thank you, Senator. In all of my work, I have stressed the importance that cost-benefit analysis should play in the regulatory process, except where prohibited by statute. And the reason is that regulations should evaluate all consequences, positive and negative, on the American people. I believe that properly conducted cost-benefit analysis should not have and does not have an anti-regulatory impact. I wrote a book about that. which doesn't mean that it has not from time to time been conducted in ways that had that impact. And I think the important thing is to make sure that all costs and benefits are considered in a fair and even-handed way. So for example, at times when unquantified benefits were ignored, or when the indirect consequences of regulation were taken into account if they were negative but ignored if they were positive, well, if that happens, cost-benefit analysis will have an anti-regulatory effect. And I will make sure, if confirmed, that I will do everything I can to see cost-benefit analysis be carried out in an even-handed way, so it's neither a Democratic tool nor a Republican tool, neither a tool that favors a large amount of regulation or opposes regulation, so that it does an accurate, even-handed, fair weighing of the consequences of regulation. That's what I see it doing, and I see that as being extremely important.
Thank you. And for my last question, as one of his first actions in office, President Biden issued his Modernizing Regulatory Review Memorandum. The memo included a request for recommendations concerning how OIRA can become more proactive in promoting and undertaking regulatory initiatives. So first, considering the limited size of OIRA, do you believe that it's feasible for desk officers to undertake the promotion of discretionary regulatory actions by agencies? And second, considering the need for an independent OIRA, will this unduly politicize the office?
Thank you, Senator. OIRA's role is primarily reactive and consists of reviewing regulatory impact analyses prepared by agencies. But since the promulgation of Executive Order 12866, OIRA has played somewhat of a proactive role with respect to the submissions by agencies of their unified regulatory agendas. And when John Graham was the OIRA administrator in the Bush administration, he instituted the practice of issuing prompt letters. And one such letter resulted in a requirement that certain large buildings have defibrillators, which is a requirement that has led to the saving of a large number of lives of people who would have died from heart attacks. So a proactive role is not completely foreign to OIRA, and President Biden asked OIRA to consider whether what proactive role might be desirable. If confirmed, I would work on how best to implement the presidential directive. I don't think that a proactive role will politicize OIRA, because OIRA's intervention will be limited to what OIRA does under Executive Order 12866, which is just to ensure that the benefits of regulation justify their costs. So when Administrator Graham in the Bush administration issued the prompt letter that led to defibrillators, he did that because he understood from his background as a public health expert that there were large benefits that would come from this requirement that were being left on the table because agencies hadn't moved to do that.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I have a question for Mr. Shriver, and I'll submit it for the record. Thank you.